What's up, everybody? I'm Mckenty. This is my second channel where I talk about business and marketing and entrepreneurship, personal development, all that other kind of stuff that's not really a fit for my main channel. In this video, I wanted to do two things. First is announce that I'm finally doing a podcast. Second is to give you kind of some insight into how I'm thinking about it, like basically the strategy behind it and some of the things I'm kind of wrestling with, so that you can understand how I think about this stuff from like a big picture, strategic kind of perspective. Because a lot of you guys ask me the same questions about your own podcasts or YouTube channels or whatever else it is. So I'll tell you how I think about it, and hopefully that will help you answer some of the questions that you might have about your own project. So like I said, I am officially committing to doing a podcast. I've talked about doing this for a long time. Now I'm officially going to do it starting in January, and the wheels are already turning on this. I'm getting assistance from my friend Deanna Chapman, who's like a podcast wizard. She has worked for Jabberjaw, if you know that podcast network. She has one of her own about Stephen King. She's the person that I've been looking for, because the reason I haven't done a podcast yet is because it's hard for me to find the time. I did a couple podcasts before. I actually did about 100 episodes of them. Just did those kind of on my own, kind of rough and DIY, and I think that was okay for when I was doing it, like starting in like 2010. But these days, standards for podcasts are higher. I don't think that what I was doing back then, which was just like recording Skype calls, I don't think that would really fly today. So I need something a little bit better, but the question is, how do I find time for that? Because I'm already doing like one video a week on my main channel, at least one video a week on this channel. Plus, I have a day job at URM Academy, as some of you guys may know. URM Academy is an online school for rock and metal producers. This month we have Will Putney on. He's going to be mixing Mistakes Like Fractures by Knock Loose, which is fucking amazing. We've been trying to get him for a very, very long time, and he is finally here. So that stuff keeps me busy. How am I going to find time for a podcast? Well, that's where Deanna comes in. Basically, what I was looking for is that person who would just do everything other than record it. So I just hand them a WAV file, and a couple days later, something pops up in Libsyn that is edited and has all the tags and metadata and all that kind of stuff. Deanna's gonna do all that for me, which is amazing. And thank you to all my patrons who've been supporting me, because that is how I'm going to fund this. Because, you know, she's a professional, I need to pay her for her time. And that is where Patreon comes in. So thank you very much for your support. You guys have made this podcast happen. The second thing I wanted to talk about was the strategy behind it, because like I said, there's some things that I've been kind of wrestling with. The main thing is like, what guests should I have on the podcast in the beginning to both set the right tone for it, but also drive audience? Because this show is not going to be a music show. I'm not interested in that. Like, to be honest, there aren't that many like musicians that I really find interesting enough to sit down with for half an hour, 45 minutes, or an hour. And I'm tired of talking about music. I already do that all day at my job. I do that on my main channel. Really, I'm interested in business and technology and personal development, that kind of stuff. That's what I really want to talk about. But on the other hand, I recognize that the majority of my following is from music. So if I was to come out of the gate interviewing a bunch of like software engineers or something, which I would love to do because I do have a background in technology, I would love to talk to some engineers, but I don't think that's what most of my audience is looking for, so it'd probably kind of fall flat. So this is the same thing as when bands are, you know, the same thing as when Bring Me the Horizon was like, man, we're kind of tired of doing deathcore. What do we do? This is a super common question for creators, right? It's like, people know me for this thing. How do I grow and also become known for this other thing without turning off and alienating all these other people? So here's how I think I'm going to go about it. I'm going to initially launch with maybe like the first 10 or so guests will be primarily music people, because I know that that's what most of my audience is, and it would kind of suck to come out of the gate with something that A, everybody hates, and B, gets like 50 downloads an episode, right? So I'm going to come out of the gate with stuff that I know people are going to respond to, which is going to be primarily music people, but I'm going to compromise by not really talking about music with these people. I'm going to talk about business with people who happen to be involved with music, but it's not going to be a music show, if that makes sense. So I'm not going to talk about like, what's your favorite band? It's going to be more like, what's your main source of revenue? That's going to be the kind of tone of the conversation. And then over time, I think I will kind of start weaving in some people who are like not music related at all. So I actually think like Joe Rogan's podcast is a great example of this working in action. He's been doing podcasts for like 10 years or so, and I've been listening to it since almost the very beginning. And at the beginning, he talked mostly to comedians and maybe like a decent amount of MMA fighters, but it was primarily comedians. And I liked it at the time, but I got kind of sick of it because, you know, to be honest, I don't find comedians to be particularly insightful. I don't really want to hear comedians talk all the time, so I sort of lost interest. But then I saw that after a couple years, he started broadening his horizons a little bit. So he would have 3 comedians and then maybe like 1 author or journalist. And that proportion changed over the years to now it's primarily authors and journalists and politicians and people like that that are totally outside comedy or MMA. And, you know, maybe 1 out of 10 episodes now is a comedian. So it's really like flipped from the beginning. And that's kind of what I want to do. Hopefully it won't take me 10 years. You know, I was talking to my wife about this, about what I should do. And she was like, well, if somebody else asked you this question, what would you tell them? And I'd say, don't be stupid. Stick to your core. If people know you for this thing, like, don't shoot yourself in the foot by taking a big left turn. Don't do a job for a cowboy. Take a big left turn and alienate everybody. Like, stick to what people know, gradually test the waters and go from there. So oftentimes in these kind of situations, that's what I do. I go, what would I tell somebody else if they asked me? And then the choice usually becomes pretty clear. Like, it becomes obvious to me what I should do. But the funny thing is, it's always so much easier to give people advice than to follow that same advice, right? So anyway, stay tuned for that podcast in January. I think I want to try to launch right after the holidays, right at the beginning of January. So I'm going to start recording these. I don't have any guests lined up yet, but you know, I don't think it'll be too hard for me to find people. So stay tuned for that. Let me know in the comments if there's anybody you would like to see me talk to, especially if that person is kind of not a musician. I will talk to dudes and girls and bands, but kind of want to keep that to a minimum, to be honest. So let me know who you would like me to talk to that is not in a band. That would be super helpful. Thank you very much to my patrons for making this possible. I really don't think I could do this without your support. So thank you to you guys. Thank you to Deanna. And also let me know if you have had any of these similar kind of questions as far as what direction you should take your YouTube show or blog or podcast or whatever it is. Because like I said, this is a super common thing and you're definitely not the only one trying to figure this stuff out. So yeah, thank you again for your support and I'll see you next time.